There is a Welsh term, I don't know how to pronounce it, I think it's Hiraeth. It's Hiraeth. Um, but it's basically a term where you're not just homesick for a place, but for a time and for a version of yourself who you used to be, and just for an experience. And you're homesick for just a set moment in time where everything was perfect, and so you can go back to that place, but you can't necessarily go back to anything else. So that's it. That's kind of the feeling that I carry with me now, is Hiraeth, for that version of me who I was when I was in England. So yeah. It sucks, but it's awesome at the same time, because it's so great to have had that experience, but it sucks to have to miss it every single day. So.
Well, I studied abroad for a really short-term period in the summer of 2011. I went to Kenya and Rwanda, and it was through a program at U of M where I went. And basically, we spent about 3 weeks working in a secondary school in Kenya, teaching students how to use technology in a place where technology is not normally widely available.
So I am a student at the University of Oxford, and I'm here for a 2-year master's program in economics. And I plan to stay here for the full 2 years, and then I probably will end up going back to the United States afterward.
I lived for about 2.5 years in Cape Town, South Africa. I was on staff with an organization called Youth with a Mission. And during that time I also traveled to Turkey, India, Mozambique for about like a month or a month and a half for each of those.
I studied at York St. John University in York, England, which is halfway between London and Edinburgh. And I had to continually correct people when I said I studied in England, and they said, well, how was London? And I had to say I wasn't in London, I was in New York. So that was new and different. I was there for about 5 months, and I studied English literature while I was there.
I spent a lot of time with the group that I was traveling with, and we would meet up about once a month and kind of have a little history lesson about Kenya before we left. So we did some reading about the country, and we did current events every time we met. So every person would have to bring in like a newspaper article about the country. So just kind of trying to get a feel for what the political climate was in Kenya, as well as the history, so we were prepared for customs and things that we should expect, and what was normal and what wasn't while we were there.
I think preparing to move overseas, I thought so much more about logistical details, and I didn't even take time necessarily to process what it would be like emotionally, socially, physically, to just be in a whole new place. So that did lead to some surprises when I first got here, because I felt that most of my preparation, and I think a lot of preparation of my friends and classmates too, has been all about the visa and moving stuff and booking flights. There maybe wasn't a chance for me to really reflect on what it would be like to be in a whole new place.
And I went on a really short service trip to South Africa for like a week in high school on my spring break, which is a little ridiculous because half of that is travel time. But it was actually a very good trip, because it kind of made me love South Africa and kind of woke me up to what goes on in the world and what's important. So during that time I decided to take a year off, what I thought was just going to be a year, and go work with an organization that my friend had been a part of and had a really good experience with.
I knew before I even went to Hope that study abroad was something I wanted to do. Because I wanted to have that experience, because it's a time abroad that you really can't have in any other way. There's the studying and the immersion, and just having a study abroad experience is so different than any other intercultural or international experience you can have. So I definitely knew I wanted to be in on that.
We spent a lot of time working one-on-one with the students, but then during our free time we did some of the more tourist-oriented activities. We did a 3-day safari. We did some hiking. We actually hiked Mount Kenya, which was a very strenuous experience. We also visited a couple of lakes and did a water safari. We got to meet with some of the local people who worked at co-op. Yeah, I think living doing the homestay, living with a host family was probably the most exciting part of my trip, because I really got to experience Kenyan life, not just as a tourist, but as an actual person living in the country. And they had a daughter who was about my age, which was really interesting because it was almost seeing what my life would be like if I had grown up in Kenya.
I think in my second year, I definitely want to explore parts of Oxford that are off the beaten track and go to restaurants and performances and museums and things that are somewhat less popular among people who travel here just to visit. Although I will say, it's sort of fun when I first got here to make sure I saw all the various touristy things, and I even liked it. I especially liked it when I had visitors, because then I felt like I had a really good excuse to go tour certain colleges or certain other tourist attractions that I might not have otherwise gone to myself, but definitely wanted to with friends.
We would go in some ways on like short trips and stuff, but none of us had much money, so we just tried to live there and do like local things with local people. And yeah, I don't know. So it is a weird mix between being a visitor, not being from there, and like exploring this new land and this new territory, and also trying to just be there and live our lives and do the work we want to do and like meet people and stuff.
Because I did have a couple months to kind of settle and spread out and kind of inhabit this place at rhythms and my set like haunts and places and favorite pubs and everything. But at the same time, I knew that if I didn't get to see some new places, and if I didn't get to places on my to-see list, that it would be a while before I could come back and see them. So it was a really weird juxtaposition.
I've brought a lot of the things that I learned in Kenya back to the States with me. For example, I've actually cooked Kenyan food for my family on a couple of occasions and kind of failed at it, but I tried. And I really like to talk about my trip, and I think that that's kind of been a way to keep it alive since I've been back in the States. I decided to apply for the Fulbright because I really loved going abroad in the past, and I thought that after graduating from college, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, and I've always wanted to do some further traveling and maybe do something more long-term.
I have found it so beneficial so far, and I'm excited about what the next year will bring. It's beneficial in a lot of different ways. One big way is that you're sort of taken out of some of the narratives that go on in the United States. A lot of the messaging that we hear from the media and that we hear in school, and exposed to new ideas and new perspectives. Being in a new place and kind of having to challenge yourself to meet people who are very different from you and who come from different cultural backgrounds, and to live away, I think, from family and friends and the comforts of home and family and friends is a good experience to have. I think it makes you appreciate some of the things that you have back home more, and it makes you more able to face other challenges in your life.
Well, probably the biggest thing that I took away from my experience in South Africa was just like my life goals. When I was there originally as a student, we spent a lot of time working with other people, and when I went back on staff, that was like my life. And I really realized how I was the most happy and satisfied I've ever been when I was doing that work, when I was spending my time helping other people figure things out and wrestle through questions and grow up. And that pretty much came exclusively from my time in South Africa.
What was it like to reintegrate back into United States culture? Did you find it easier, harder than when you left?
It's terrible. Oh my word. So this ring is actually
the geographic coordinates of York Minster, which was my home church for the semester, and I miss it every day of my life. And I actually have York, UK inscribed on the inside of it. And then the Claddagh ring I got in Galway while I was studying. My dad came over to visit me, and we took a trip over to Galway to see the area where our family is from, so just the good memories of that trip while I was studying as well. So this hand is just full of good memories.
I think that's kind of a closed-minded view of the situation, because just because something is temporary, I think, doesn't mean it's not meaningful. And I have found in my past travels that, yes, you have to say goodbye to these people. I'm not going to be there long term, and it is difficult to kind of get so invested and then have to leave. But it's never really, an experience like that is never really over if you learn something from it and you leave something for the people that you meet there.
And I will have changed in some way, but overwhelmingly I feel like I will have changed for the better. I feel like I will have totally new perspective on life and on my own goals and my own strengths and weaknesses. I think it's worth it. I think someone who is considering going abroad should go abroad if they can find the means. And I think everybody should do it. I think it's totally worth it. You might go abroad for 6 months, for a year. You think, oh, you'll just cultivate friendships and then what will come of them? You will cultivate friendships that will last you forever.
I think the biggest thing that you could get from that experience, as opposed to staying in your hometown and cultivating relationships there, it's just the personal growth. You grow as you're challenged by people who are different from you and people who question you and make you think differently, and that can happen in your hometown, but it happens more when you're with people who are very different from you.
You really do learn a lot about yourself, and you're basically forced to face yourself when you're on that plane and there's a baby crying behind you, everyone's sneezing, and you wonder if it's all worth it, or if your train is stuck and if you're getting overcharged to go to a museum even though you're not supposed to be charged that. When you go abroad and you see the good, the bad, and the ugly of all sorts of situations, like people not enjoying your presence because of your nationality, having to lie and say you're Canadian. You see a different side of human nature, and you're completely out of your element, and you're forced to basically just confront who you are, and you're given the opportunity to shape who you want to be.
Yeah, nice. Just put it all the way in, all the way in your mouth.
I'm on the pursuit of happiness, and I know everything is shining on.